On October 4th, 1957, the USSR launched the world's first artificial satellite, the Sputnik 1, into space. This sent shockwaves of fear through the American and Chinese branches of the philosophers, as they were concerned about the implications that the Soviet Union might use spacecraft technology as a weapon against them. In response to this, the United States threw all of their resources into space research with hopes of one-upping the Soviets' efforts, thus igniting the space race. America developed its own satellite, the Explorer 1, and launched it into space on February 1st, 1958. And in July of the same year, America founded the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, which soon after its inception began its efforts to launch the first human being into space with Project Mercury. It was on June 12th of 1959, sometime around noon, that the boss parted ways with her student John. The boss abandoned him with no explanation during survival training to appear before President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who gave her a top-secret mission that could potentially put America ahead of the Soviet Union in the space race. Her mission was to infiltrate the USSR in order to steal their technology and sabotage their program by planting a sleeper agent within their research institute OKB-1. Because Eisenhower did not consult the CIA about sending the boss for this mission, they offered her no support, forcing her to tap into the Philosophers' Network in order to obtain the intel and resources needed to carry out her mission. She took advantage of certain Russian rebels within the Philosophers who opposed the one-party communist state, manipulating them in order to find a way into OKB-1. The boss knowingly risked her life with these actions, along with the life of her son Adamska, who was still being held by the Philosophers. If they knew what she was doing, they would undoubtedly use her son as leverage against her. The boss was ultimately successful in planting a sleeper agent within OKB-1, and NASA began receiving vast amounts of data directly from the Soviet space program, which they used to their considerable advantage. The CIA then stepped in to take all the credit for the boss's success. This didn't bother her, however, as her own self-fulfillment and serving her country was all that mattered to her. The sleeper agent within OKB-1 continued to send valuable intel to NASA, along with reports that the Soviets were falling behind due to various technical inefficiencies. While the US was elated by these reports, the boss was skeptical. Things seemed too good to be true, and her suspicions peaked when she discovered discrepancies in one of the blueprints the agent provided for Sputnik 5, which contained an ejector seat. This perplexed the boss, since the agent's reports up until now had seemed to confirm that the Soviets had not been experimenting with human spaceflight. The boss proposed an investigation into this matter, but NASA and the CIA dismissed her, believing she was simply trying to take back the glory she lost when the CIA took credit for her successful mission. Alone again, without any external support, the boss carried out an unsanctioned mission to infiltrate OKB-1 a second time in order to get to the bottom of the Sputnik 5's blueprint. During the boss's infiltration, but unrelated to it, two NSA codebreakers, codenamed Adam and Eva, defected to the Soviet Union's KGB. Adam was in fact the boss's own son, Adamska, and Eva's identity was soon stolen by a triple agent working for the Chinese. These two would later have a significant impact on John during an important mission in the near future. The boss succeeded once again in infiltrating OKB-1, where she discovered to her dismay that the sleeper agent she planted there had defected to the Soviet Union and was feeding the Americans false information. The agent had been feeding NASA lies and supplying the Soviets with valuable intel from the American space projects, which allowed the Soviets to become a major contender in the space race. The ejector seat the boss noticed on the Sputnik 5's blueprint was in fact used for human spaceflight. The Soviets had apparently already sent humans into space in launches that were covered up due to their failure, to successfully re-enter the atmosphere. One of the Russian cosmonauts who took part in these failed launches was none other than the boss's former Cobra unit comrade, the Fury, who had been the very first person to enter space. But complications with his capsule's return to Earth triggered a fire in which he suffered severe burns to his entire body. Though he survived, the Soviet Union decided not to publicize this, as they could not have the Fury's horrible burns and disfigurement become the face of their space program. This, and the failed launches that followed, became known as the Lost Cosmonauts Conspiracy, and it was never truly proven that these launches took place. His near-death experience became a defining moment for the Fury, causing his previous proclivity for fire to develop into full-blown pyromania. The image of the Earth obscured by a wall of fire as he plummeted from space would never leave his mind. The CIA did everything in their power to remain blameless for the defective sleeper agent, so they claimed that it was all the boss's fault. They chastised her for neglecting to employ harsh tactics, such as holding the agent's family hostage to ensure loyalty, but she would never have been able to do so, since she knew what it was like having her own child taken from her. The boss once again did not fight against the will of the CIA and was branded a traitor by President John F. Kennedy. To atone for her alleged treason, the boss was forced to act as NASA's test subject for the US's manned spaceflight program, Project Mercury, during which she underwent extreme and punishing tests that were deemed too life-threatening for astronaut candidates. Through it all, the boss remained obedient, forever loyal to the country she called home, despite its own resentment towards her. Though these tests were initially intended to break the boss, she actually proved a valuable asset, using her immense experience as a soldier to offer advice and training to the Mercury 7 astronauts, which led to her new nickname, the Mercury Lady. During her time with NASA, the boss met Dr. Strangelove. Strangelove oversaw Project Mercury and thus became very close with the boss. The more the two of them worked together, the more Strangelove admired the boss and her unwavering resolve. Strangelove took it upon herself to ensure the boss's safety during Project Mercury's more rigorous tests, so as not to lose her newfound friend. It was brought to NASA's attention that the Soviet spacecrafts were being outfitted with windows, and so as not to fall behind their competitors, the US government ordered the same to be done for their shuttles. This was a risky proposition, as the addition of windows would weaken the spacecraft and cause those inside to become vulnerable to cosmic rays. Since the government did not wish to put the Mercury 7 astronauts at risk, the boss was enlisted to pilot the windowed craft. With only a 20% chance of survival, the boss willingly accepted this task, much to the dismay of Dr. Strangelove, who threatened to stop her from undertaking it by reporting the fact that the boss sustained a brain injury during her mission to assassinate John von Neumann, a fact that the boss had told Strangelove in confidence. The boss stopped Strangelove's efforts to prevent her from boarding the spacecraft, however, for her duty to her country was of the utmost importance to her. On April 11, 1961, the US received intel that the Soviets had their spacecraft ready for launch, and in a desperate attempt to ensure their victory in the space race, NASA cut their tests short and planned to launch their rocket the very next day. Without a word of hesitation, the boss entered the craft, knowing full well that she would likely not survive the launch. The launch proved a miraculous success, however, and the boss became the first female ever to enter space, just behind the Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, the first man and human in space. It was the awe-inspiring visage of Earth from space that reawoke the values the boss's father had taught her when she was a child. A deep desire grew within her to see all the world's inhabitants united in peace, to see a world devoid of borders, a world without communism, without capitalism, A unified Earth, governed only by global harmony. While Gagarin returned to Earth safely, the hastily crafted windows on the boss's capsule caused it to be thrown off course during her descent. She crash-landed in the ocean, suffering multiple injuries and entering a 6-month coma, but ultimately surviving. The boss and Dr. Strangelove were never reunited. The fact that Gagarin entered space mere moments before the boss and his successful re-entry against the boss's crash landing caused the US much grief, and they never acknowledged the boss's achievements despite the fact that it was their own foolish rushing that caused these mishaps. In an attempt to cover up their shortcomings, the boss was expunged from all flight records, and all traces of her time as the Mercury Lady were destroyed. To account for her injuries and subsequent coma, the US government claimed that she sustained them when she took part in the unsuccessful Bay of Pigs mission in Cuba, which she was never actually a part of. When she awoke from her coma, the boss returned to a world in which she was a scapegoat for the people of America to focus their resentment, instead of being honored as the selfless patriot she was.